Okay. Hey, can we break in? Yes. Good afternoon, I'm Annie Elming. We are breaking into programming as we bring you Nebraska State Patrol News Conference live. We're expecting to hear an update from that shooting in Crete that injured 6 people last night. There's no current threat in Crete. Let's listen in.
Good afternoon, thanks for coming today. I'm Colonel John Bolduck with the Nebraska State Patrol. With me today is Chief Gary Young from the Crete Police Department, Sheriff Alan Moore from the Saline County Sheriff's Office, and Mr. David Solheim, County Attorney in Saline County. We wanted to answer a few of the questions that you may have after the early stages of this investigation have been concluded. First, I'd like to express my immense gratitude for the quick and likely life-saving actions taken by many of the first responders in the early moments after the report of an active shooter came in yesterday afternoon. Our hearts continue to be with the victims, their families, and the entire Crete community. Thankfully, at this point, all victims are either still receiving care or have already been released from the hospital. Just to recap the timeline, at about 4:43, Saline County 911 received multiple calls of an active shooter situation in the 1200 block of Crestline Drive in the city of Crete. Crete police officers and Saline County deputies responded immediately, and Crete police officers were there within just a few minutes. As they approached the scene, they could still hear gunfire occurring. At this point, officers reached the victim's house and they heard one single gunshot come from the home behind them. The officers and the first EMTs to arrive on scene then went into the active scene and carried victims from the rear of the residence to safety, where they could be treated by emergency first responders and then taken to the hospital. In total, we have now identified 7 victims. 6 were transported from the scene by ambulance to Crete Area Medical Center. The 7th patient realized he had been injured later in the evening and was treated and released that night. Another adult victim had already been treated and released. 3 of the victims remain hospitalized at this time, 1 at Bryan Health in Lincoln and 2 at Children's Hospital in Omaha. Out of respect for the family's request for privacy, we will not be identifying the victims. I can say that 3 of the victims are adults ranging in ages from 22 to 43. 4 of the victims are children, ranging in age from 3 to 10. There were about 15 people present at the home at the time of this shooting. Some of them were inside and others were outside. Most of the victims were outside at the time of the shooting, but at least one was inside the home when they were struck. As the victims were being evacuated, troopers, deputies, and additional officers set up a perimeter around the area to keep other residents safe. It was quickly determined that all gunfire had come from a single residence at 1810 Parkland Street. The NSP SWAT team was activated and responded to what was now believed to be a barricaded subject. At about 6:40 p.m., the SWAT team made entry into the home and located the suspect with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The suspect has been identified as Billy Booth, age 74. Investigators located a shotgun near the deceased person. Once the scene was secure, NSP investigators were able to begin their on-scene investigation. Preliminary investigation shows that all rounds fired by Booth came from inside of his house. Investigators are still actively working this investigation to understand everything that occurred, but at this point, we don't believe there was any verbal contact between the suspect and any of the victims in the moments that led up to the shooting. There had, however, been a prior history between the suspect and the victims' families. For that, I will be deferring to Chief Gary Young to provide some of the history that Crete PD has had with the suspect. Before we take any questions, I want to reiterate how thankful we are that none of the victims appear at this time to have life-threatening injuries. Recovery will be a long road for some of them, but thanks to the quick actions of the first responders and the expert medical care they received, it is our firm hope that all will survive and put this tragic event behind them. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Do we know if the suspect was legally allowed to own a gun?
The question was the subject a prohibited person? To our knowledge, he was not. To our knowledge, he is legally able to possess a firearm.
Was there only one firearm found in his home?
The question was there more than one firearm found in the home? The answer is yes. We found 2 firearms. Our investigation at this point shows that only one of the firearms was used during the shooting.
And it was believed to be a shotgun.
It is a shotgun that was used, yes.
Do you know how many shots were fired in total from the perpetrator?
I don't have that answer, and that will be part of the investigation that's continuing.
I guess, can you provide any details on prior police contact at either of these addresses?
Yeah, regarding prior police contacts, I'm going to defer to Chief Young, who can address that question.
Good afternoon. The Crete Police Department had responded to several complaints over since 2021. Most of them dealt with driving behavior, not necessarily associated with the victim's house, but cars driving too fast in the neighborhood, improper parking, nuisance properties, quality of life type issues. There was a single report from the victims that the suspect had flipped them off, told them to go home or back to where they came from, to speak English. In that case, the responding officer interviewed the family, interviewed the suspect, was willing to take it for prosecution. The family declined at that time. My understanding is that additional contacts were made between the suspect and the family, and the family told them that they would contact the police, and that resolved the situation, so we had no further contact. That was based on interviews of the family yesterday.
When was the last time you had contact with the suspect?
I believe it was May of this year.
Just for clarification, the calls regarding quality of life issues and parking, was that Booth calling to complain on the family, or was that the family calling to complain on Booth?
That was Booth calling to complain generally about the neighborhood. As maybe you've seen in the photos, it's a part of a dead end and a looped street, and it's a heavily populated family area, so there are multiple cars, and it's a little tight in there. So I think that those are the calls he was calling about, and that's what our records show.
Was there a racial component to this, to the prior complaints?
There could be. We don't know. Certainly the context of go home and speak English lends itself to that.
Do we know if there is a motive yet, or if this was considered a hate crime?
I'm sorry.
Do we know if there was a motive of this, or if this is considered a hate crime?
We don't have a motive yet. The investigators for the State Patrol collected phones, computers, those types of things, and as part of the investigation, we'll delve into trying to determine a motive for yesterday's incident.
And as a police chief of Crete, how often do you see mass shootings or shootings of this nature?
This is the second one of my career. The first one occurred at Americold 13 years ago. And that was a disgruntled employee. I hope that I can get out of this job without having another one.
Do we know a number of how many people were in the area at the time of the shooting?
In the area of the house, or in the house itself?
Both in the house as well as just in the area of the conflict.
I don't know about in the area. I know our officers evacuated houses on both sides of the victim's house. I don't have a number on how many people came out of those houses.
Can you kind of give a setup of the distances from the suspect's house to where the victims were, or was this a large area, or was it fairly close? Some little description of the neighborhood, maybe.
The neighborhood, the streets are somewhat narrow, maybe 24, 28 feet. With the suspect shooting from his house, which was set back from the roadway into the yard of the house. It could be that, we're talking 50 feet, maybe a little more.
Did you have any contact with the suspect prior to finding him deceased? From the time the incident was reported, did you have any contact with him?
No, we did not.
Were all the victims within their own yard at the time?
We believe so, but that's part of the ongoing investigation. We're not sure where everybody was specifically placed.
Were all the victims residents of that house, or were there other?
There were other people visiting, so I can't tell you right now who was a resident and who was a visitor.
Do we know if any, and if so, how many of the victims were related to one another?
That again, I'm not sure. With the State Patrol working that investigation side, we haven't had the time to sit down and put all the pieces together yet.
Did the shooter have any previous record or convictions of anything?
I'm sorry?
Did the shooter have any previous record or convictions?
Not that I'm aware of. He did have a previous arrest in Lancaster County in 1994 for a domestic issue. However, there were no convictions.
Can you describe the injuries that were inflicted on the victims?
I have had no contact with victims or the officers. The investigators who helped us from Lincoln Police Department and the Nebraska State Patrol have more details on those. I have not seen reports for that yet.
Thank you.
Colonel, do you want to add? This is not life-threatening.
Yes, thank you. So the question about the victim's injuries, all of the injuries are consistent with shotgun blast injuries. And as you know, a shotgun disperses many pellets when a shotgun is discharged, which that probably accounts for the large number of people who were struck. And as we know, there were multiple rounds fired. We don't know exactly how many. And with the relative ranges, that lends itself to the fact that we're dealing with injuries and not necessarily fatalities. But of course, that will be part of the investigation, determining who was where when they were struck. But all the injuries are very consistent with shotgun wounds, and they do vary. One person was hit by one pellet, one person was hit by many, but thankfully, again, at this point, we believe that all will survive, but some will take some time to recover.
Do you know what type of ammunition it was, buckshot, birdshot, or what type?
I don't know that at this time, but that's certainly knowable, and that will come out in the conclusion of the investigation.
Did you find additional ammunition when you reached the house?
I don't know the answer to that right now, but certainly when we're done categorizing all the evidence that was recovered, we will have the answer to that.
Anything else?
There have been rumors circulating of a video that was taken and then released of the shooting. Is there any confirmation of that?
I'm not aware of any of that information, but certainly if anybody has any information, recordings of any kind that might be helpful in this investigation, we would encourage them to contact the Crete Police Department or the Nebraska State Patrol. We would welcome any witness statements or video or audio evidence that would be helpful. Obviously, we're not looking at a prosecution since the lone suspect is deceased, but we do owe it to the community to find all of the information that we can to determine what led up to this and provide answers to the community.
Have there been any eyewitness statements that have come forward yet?
We have talked to several witnesses on the scene last night and are continuing to interview people, and certainly the victims themselves will be interviewed as they are medically able to do so. And again, that's part of the ongoing investigation.
Then is there anything in the near future that the community of Crete and of Southeast Nebraska can do to assist in the family, or is there any sort of visual or fundraiser or anything happening soon to assist that?
I'm going to defer to Chief Young. He may be able to assist with that.
As of this time, I know of no efforts, concerted or organized efforts to assist the family. They have additional family members in town, and certainly we will be reaching out to them, and the community in general, I imagine, will be.
Is the scene cleared now? I mean, everything, or part of it still shut down?
I believe everything has been opened back up and the scene is cleared.
Do you know the ethnicities of all the victims?
I'm sorry.
Ethnicity of the victims.
The ethnicity of the victim, I'm going to say Hispanic. I'm not sure particular countries.
Is that of all 7 victims?
I believe so.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.